Hi, I'm Maggie. Thank you for stopping by Crafts the Charm today. You are most welcome here. In the summer, I like to create a sort of tropical oasis in my backyard. It's a little bit tricky because I live in New England, but what I'd like to do today is take some Dollar Tree items that might not necessarily scream pillow to you and turn them into some tropical pillows for my backyard. Let's go have some fun. Now, what I bought from Dollar Tree for this project was this cotton bag, and this is printed on one side. I have found at one Dollar Tree some plain bags. They are white. This one's sort of off-white. I also bought a tablecloth, which is a tropical patterned tablecloth, and I have a patterned tropical scarf as well. I wasn't sure if the tablecloth was going to work out, so I'm sort of offering up the scarf as an alternative. I bought one of these grass hula skirts, and ultimately I did not use that. I bought a flower lei. This flower lei is green. If there were a white one, I would have preferred a white one, but I don't know if there are white ones. I also have the brown nautical rope. Now, with the lei, if you take it apart, you will find that there are obviously the flower pieces. And by the way, it does shed a bit, so just be wary of that. But there are also these little plastic spacers, and I thought that that would be perfect for making beads. Now, when I decided to make the beads from the lei, I originally thought that I might actually string them or sew them. So I used some thread. I thought that you could possibly also use the bamboo skewer, but I decided to use thread so that I could just thread all of the beads onto one long piece of thread. So what I did was I began by threading one of the plastic beads, and then I just used regular white glue and I glued it to the top of one of the flowers. I mean, if you just lay a flower down, they've got 5 petals, so 1 petal up. And then I just started rolling. Now, here's what I learned eventually, because I made a lot of these, is the easiest way to do it was to put glue sort of at the top petal, if you think of it as a head, down the little body and down the little legs, and ignore the little arms. And just roll it, and again, just sort of ignore those 2 side petals as you roll. And then you're probably going to need maybe a little bit of extra glue to get it to stay together. It was a little bit tricky to get it to stay together. And then the other thing is, you may want it to look a little bit more long and thin, or you may want it to look like tight in the middle but with the petals on the ends a little looser. And I think I prefer the long, thin, tight look, but I have sort of a mix in my beads. Now, what I then did once I had that wrapped is I did a technique called whipping, which I have done before on this channel, and I'll include a link to the candle decor video, which is where I really go into detail about how to do the whipping, but I will also describe it here. So what you do when you are going to whip is, first you're going to cut a length of the string or whatever that you're going to whip with. I am using this jute, about 2 lengths of one of the lei flowers. So cut that, form a loop, hold the loop against the middle of the flower, and it's a small loop. And then basically you just wrap the jute around the loop. You're going to leave one end a little bit free. Try to be neat when you wrap it around. I was having a little trouble with the thread getting in my way. Once you're almost out of that jute that you're wrapping around, you're going to put it through the end of the loop and then pull the other end, so that ends up pulling that thread underneath the wrapping that you just did, and then you can pull both ends tight. Now don't pull too tight because you have that little plastic bead in there. You don't want to crush it, but pull it relatively tight. So I figured that for my pillow I was going to need about 5 beads to line the top of the pillow, because what I was going to do was just line these along the top and along the bottom, and then use that brown nautical rope sort of as part of the decoration. So also line the pillow top and bottom with the nautical rope. So I think I made 22 beads so that I would have enough just in case 5 wasn't enough, but that's 10 each for 2 pillows, 5 at the top, 5 at the bottom. Now, with the tablecloth, it's white in the middle, so the part that would go on the table is white, and then the part that would hang down has this leaf pattern on it. But I thought that was a really perfect height, because these are going to be long, thin pillows. I thought that was a really perfect height for the pillow that I want. And what I decided is, because it's quite thin, that I would sort of double it up with the white. So what I did was I cut 4 pieces, which are both the pattern and the white. So for the front and the back of each pillow. So I just cut them basically where the pattern ends. So that was the height of my pillow, and that's around 12 inches. And the length of the pillow, or width, depending on how you look at it, is 20 inches, or of the tablecloth piece that I cut. Well, we can call it fabric. So 20 inches wide by about 12 inches tall of the pattern and a white piece, just to give it a little bit more material. Now, to attach the beads and the nautical rope, what I did was I used some hot glue just to put it in place, and then I sewed them. So a few tips here. First of all, this is a plastic tablecloth. It will melt. This is a low temperature glue gun. I would not get that glue gun anywhere near the tablecloth. I did melt a piece of tablecloth a little bit, and I had to cut a new piece of tablecloth. And then we are going to sew these on. The glue is just to hold it in place to make it easier to sew on. And it is very, very difficult and not good for your needle to sew through hot glue. So only use a tiny bit of hot glue. Remember where you're using it and don't sew in that location. So you might want to glue the middle, the jute part of your beads, and then sew on the ends or on the outside of the jute part. Or you might want to sew the jute part and glue on the other side of it. And then the same thing with the rope. I glued that down as well. Now, once I glued all of those pieces down and then sewed all of those pieces down, I decided I didn't like the way it looked. I didn't like how bright the tablecloth was. I do like the other side. If you flip it over, you can still see the pattern through it. And so I ended up destroying that first one that I made, trying to pull all the pieces off so I could reuse them, and throwing away the piece of tablecloth and cutting a new one and flipping them over. So using the underside or the reversed side of the tablecloth instead of the front side. So once I had all of the decoration, top and bottom, on both front sides of my 2 pillows, I just took the other 2 pieces, the back side pieces, put them on top, front sides together, as it were, the decorated side and the reverse side of the other tablecloth, because that's the side that I'm considering my outward side, with the white over it, pinned them, and then sewed the long ends on my sewing machine, turned it to make sure it looked okay, and then turned it back and sewed one end closed. And with my sewing machine, I'm always worried about going over something thick like that nautical rope, So I just did that very slowly. And I also found that the tablecloth fabric could bunch up a little bit when I was sewing it on my sewing machine. It could gather a little bit. So I just had to be really careful when I was sewing it to make sure that it didn't gather up, that it sewed well. But it was fine. I sewed it fine on the sewing machine. Once I got the 3 sides sewn together, then I turned it and I stuffed it with some stuffing from an old pillow. It used to be a beautiful old pillow, but the outside is really very worn now. So I cut it open and took the stuffing out, sort of refluffed the stuffing a little bit because it had become sort of compressed. And I was able to stuff both pillows with one of my old pillows plus a little bit more from a second of the old pillows. And then once it was stuffed, I just sort of folded those ends, that last open end in together, pinned it, and then stitched it shut with a slip stitch. And that was it for this set of pillows. Now, one option that you might want to consider if you think that this is just a little too plain as it is, and I was really torn, would be to take some of those leftover flowers and sew them to the front of the pillow. And I think if those flowers had been white, if I hadn't chosen a green lei, if I had chosen a white one, if there is a white one, I can't remember, that I think I might have done that. I think it looks nice on the front. And then what I would do is take some of that jute twine and just sort of roll it into a center for the flower and sew that on. So that's an option to dress it up a little bit if you think it's a little bit too plain the way it is. Now for my second pillow. I'm going to make the second pillow out of that canvasy sort of bag. And I really wanted to make a brown pillow, but I thought, let's see if we can make this from something that I've purchased at the Dollar Tree and not have to go buy some brown fabric. So I make coffee in a French press, and these are my old coffee grounds. I've re-added some warm water. I didn't want to make it boiling hot water, and I just put the bag into the coffee to dye it, and then I placed some cups and things on top to hold it under the water. And I wasn't sure if this was going to give me a dark enough color, but I figured I'd give it a try and see how a coffee dye works. And it did not work very well, and I don't know if that's because I used old grounds or because I didn't let it dye long enough. I left it for a couple of hours, or it was because I didn't have the water hot enough. I have tea dyed and coffee dyed things in the past, and usually it doesn't give you a very dark color. But that's what I started with. So then I decided, well, let me see if I can sort of fabric paint it. Again, I didn't want to go out and buy some RIT dye or really buy anything. I wanted to use things that maybe you would also have around the house. So I thought, let me see if I can make fabric paint out of just regular acrylic paint, and I have this brown burnt umber paint that I like a lot. So I've got 1 part glycerin to 4 parts water, and then 5 parts of my brown paint. So the same amount of the glycerin water mixture as paint. And I painted that on just one side of this bag, and it was still damp when I did that, and you'll see that gives a really cool effect. I think if I had done it when it was dry, that I probably would have gotten a more solid brown color, but I really love the way it came out because I did it when it was damp, because to me it looks like just sort of an old worn bag, you know, repurposed messenger bag kind of thing. Like somebody took an old bag and made it into a pillow. So with the bag painted, I went back to my old pillow, and my old pillow has this sort of piping or welting detail on it. And I freed the piping from the pillow, and I thought that I would see how that looked as a decoration on my new brown pillow. And you can see I've taken one of my other pillows and sort of stuffed it in the bag just so that I can plump it up and see how it will look as a pillow. So I thought that maybe the piping would make a sort of a cool vine if I just sort of wrapped it around on the pillow, twirled it, and then I would take some of the flowers from the lei and paint them white and put them on the pillow. Now, I just used my apple barrel acrylic paint, and what I would recommend is either mixing up a fabric paint like I did before for the bag itself, or but if you happen to have a fabric paint, use the fabric paint that you have, or I don't know, maybe spray paint, or don't be like me, buy the color lei that you want to begin with, because these did flake a little bit, these flowers. So once I had all of my pieces, I decided to iron the bag. Now, it's still going to have that look to it where the wrinkles were, the parts that weren't as painted where the wrinkles were. But I didn't want the bag itself to be wrinkled. I just wanted it to look like it was old and had been worn. And I was a little bit worried that the paint might come off when I ironed it, especially on my iron. So I did iron it on a towel, and I put paper towels between my iron and the bag and the towel that I'm ironing it on. But the paint for the most part really didn't come off, maybe just a tiny little bit, but it seems pretty color fast. So, and because it's cotton, I did use a high temperature and I sprayed it with water while I was ironing it. So once ironed, I again did use my technique of using hot glue to attach things where I want them, and just a very tiny amount of hot glue, and then sewing them into place after. I sewed the flowers into place. I will be honest, I did not sew the piping into place. So far it's doing just fine with hot glue. Now with these flowers, I did use the jute, wrapped it into a spiral and glued it into the center of the flowers, and then again I did sew those down, so very little glue. I sewed the flowers down and I sewed the jute centers down, but I did not sew the piping down. Once all the decor is sewn onto the bag and you're happy with it, cut the straps off, stuff it, and again I had enough stuffing left from my pillows to stuff this one. Now you can of course buy fiberfill if you don't have an old pillow that you want to take apart and use for stuffing. I have heard of people using plastic bags as stuffing. I would think that would make a lot of noise, but for an outside pillow that is an alternative, because of course it won't get soggy if you like to leave your pillows out. I cover my outdoor furniture and I usually bring the cushions in. And then, of course, once it is stuffed, take that final open edge, turn it in, and then do a slip stitch and close it up. Now, once I had finished sewing my pillow together, I wanted to do a detail around the edge of it. And what I thought would be cool would be something like a lashing detail. So if you look at structures that are made of bamboo, sometimes they're lashed together, the pieces of bamboo. So I thought I would use that nautical rope, the brown nautical rope from the Dollar Tree, and cut pieces that are about 1.5 inches longer at each edge. So each piece is going to go one length of the pillow plus 3 inches, 1.5 inches on either end. So we're going to get this 1.5 inch overlap at each corner. So basically we're making an X. And I found these instructions on the Boy Scouts of America website for doing a lashing. And I've never done this before. Now because this isn't wood, the pieces of rope weren't sitting very still. So I did end up taping them down so that I could practice with the lashing. So I practiced. I wasn't sure how much of this. I have this white rope. I don't know exactly what it is. It's a nylon rope. I would say just use any white string or rope that you want to, something thinner than the nautical rope to do the lashing. And I just followed the instructions first with it still on the roll because I wasn't sure how much to cut. So I ended up cutting about twice the length of the pillow for each corner lashing that I did. That was maybe a little bit more than I needed. And again, I just followed these instructions as best I could to get a little lashing. It's decorative. I'm not building a structure that anybody's going to climb on, so nobody's going to get hurt if I didn't do the lashing right on the corners of the pillow. So I did the lashing on the corner, and then I sewed it to the pillow through the lashing. And then in the middle, I did another whipping, just to give me a little white area in the middle that I sewed to the pillow in the middle on each edge. So these pieces of the brown rope are sewed to the pillow at the corners through the lashing and in the middles through the whipping, and that's it. You could, of course, sew the rope itself down to the pillow all along the pillow. I liked the idea that it was only attached at the lashing and the whipping, so that's how I did it. So you can see what that looks like on the pillow now that it's done. And here it is outside. This is where Mr. Crafts the Charm and I like to sit in the summer and relax. And then when I brought the pillows inside, I actually really liked the way they looked inside, maybe even more than the way they looked on my deck, so I might leave them here. So what did you think of our tropical pillows made from a tablecloth and a bag and a flower lei? I really had fun making them. Even though these are made from tablecloths, and the tablecloths were really pretty difficult to work with, I do like the way they feel, and I think that they'll be nice outside, like if you come out of the pool and you're wet, or if you're warm and perspiring. I think that these will be a nice pillow to lean against. And the other pillow, I'll admit, I like the colors of this one better, and I had a lot of fun learning how to do the lashing and doing the lashing on the edges. If you made these pillows, or if you made variations especially, or if you have suggestions, I'd love to hear about them in the comments. If you liked this video, please give it a thumbs up, and if you enjoy this sort of content, please subscribe to Crafts the Charm. Thank you for spending time with me today. Take care.